So we're going to have Lynn Sparrow Christy, and she's going to explore the distinctive spiritual path as a path of co-creatorship that involves us in the development of not only our own lives, but also the cosmos, the biological world, and the consciousness itself. But what does it really mean to co-create? And these are things that Lynn Sparrow Christy is going to speak about today. She's been studying the Edgar Cayce readings for more than 50 years. She's trained as a hypnotherapist, a hypnosis trainer, a life coach, N.L.P practitioner. Combined with her Cayce work and experience in college study of theology, psychology, Lynn synergizes these tools in language to work with people and diverse backgrounds and to turn abstract concepts into practical applications for growth and healing. She's the author of Beyond Soul Growth, Awakening to the Call of Cosmic Evolution, as well as 2 other books and numerous articles and courses based on the Cayce readings. And you can find more information at her website at accessyourpotential.net. And then without further ado, Lynn Sparrow Christy, thank you.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Thanks to the wonders of cyberspace, which works most of the time, right? And I'm especially pleased to be part of a day that's exploring the many dimensions of the reincarnation story. As mentioned in my intro, I first encountered a serious approach to reincarnation when I began reading Edgar Cayce books when I was only 15. And I can tell you that almost immediately it became a cornerstone of my personal spiritual philosophy. Subsequently, reincarnation came to be pretty central in my professional life as well. I began writing and teaching about reincarnation. Along the way, I started developing and conducting workshops on how to remember and construct theories about past lives, and eventually began doing one-on-one regressions when I, about 35 years ago now, opened my private practice as a hypnotherapist and life coach. And I probably don't have to tell you just how helpful and important it can be to really grapple with your soul's story on this path in time, space, and beyond. But that's actually not the main focus of what I want to talk with you about today. I would like instead to focus not so much on the what and the how of reincarnation, but on the why. Because from the very beginning, one of the things that often bothered me when I would hear the reincarnation philosophy expounded was the idea that we're here to make our way back to where we came from, that we're strangers in the earth, that our real home is in a state of glorious oneness with God that we had at the beginning and somehow we lost it. And ever since then, the path has been about undoing a cosmic mistake made at the beginning of time. Well, that seems like a pretty bleak story to me. If you've ever missed your exit on a limited access highway and had to drive back 10 miles just to be where you started before you went wrong, you get a tiny, tiny indication of the cosmic version of reincarnation being about going back to where we started. The idea that all of the soul's growth and failures, its struggles and its triumphs, human histories, progress and setbacks, the wars, the famines, the beautiful inventions and breakthroughs, all of that is about nothing but going back to where we started. I'm not buying it. I think instead what we find, and this is particularly evident in a deep dive into the Edgar Cayce philosophy of reincarnation, is that this is really a story about going forward. It's a story about moving to an experience, a state of being that we have never known before. It's about participating in the unfolding, the evolutionary development of an entire cosmos. And it's that I would like to really focus on in my session with you today. And as I begin to do a screen share, what we're really talking about here is the path of the co-creator, which is a very distinctive approach to how we're going to view the soul's walk through incarnation, reincarnation, and yes, even the times in between. Because this is a path that embraces this earth and the life that we live here as our participation in a universe that is going somewhere. It's about recognizing the obvious fact that the force that birthed the cosmos must have had some purpose for doing so. It's just not imaginable to me that this vast cosmos is about nothing more than being a school for wayward souls. There is some divine intention and purpose in the unfolding that has brought something out of nothing. And the path of the co-creator takes our role in being part of that unfolding and seeks to clarify it. It's about living into our deepest purpose as co-creators. Now, we hear the term co-creator quite a lot these days, but I believe Edgar Cayce was one of the first, if not the first, to coin the term. He was speaking about it at least as long ago as 1931. And when we look at what Edgar Cayce has to say about co-creation, it's not a side story. It is instead at the very heart of the soul's story. For the purpose is that each soul should be a co-creator with God. Now notice that it isn't an optional add-on, it's each soul. And there weren't that many universals in the Cayce material. Any of you who are familiar with Edgar Cayce know that he always gave readings for individuals, and we have to be very careful in drawing generalizations. But this is one of the few times he put us all in this basket, that every one of us has a purpose to be a co-creator. Our very existence on this planet is tied into the manifestation of a co-creative process. So it probably would be good to ask the question, rather than just assume we all have the sense of what it is, to say, so what is a co-creator anyway? And in order to kind of zero in on how we might look at that question, I'd like to share with you two stories about dirt. Now, I didn't say two dirty stories, so get that part clear. But two stories about dirt that I think illustrate beautifully the co-creative process. A little more than 10 years ago now, I think it was around 2012, 2011, it was big news when the Hadron Particle Accelerator enabled scientists to actually discover the Higgs boson, which was dubbed in the media the God particle. And there was lots of talk at the time about how this God particle brought us right to the building block of matter, because it had to do with how subatomic particles are given mass. They're given three-dimensional reality in this world. And at that time, there was a story that very much amused me about God and the scientist. And as the story goes, the scientist is talking to God, and flush with victory over this wonderful scientific breakthrough, the scientist says, well, God, I guess we don't need you anymore because we have figured out how to create, and we have the God particle of life. And God said, oh, really? I'd like to see this. Show me. So the scientist said, well, first you get a handful of dirt, at which point God said, get your own dirt. And right there, we see the thing we're up against. Anytime we forget that we are part of something that involves a someone who is far more than we are. that there is a force of the divine, by whatever name we may call it, that is absolutely essential to anything ever being in existence at all. Now, in contrast, there's the other story, a much older one, about the man who bought a piece of property that was really overgrown. It was full of weeds and brambles and rocks, and he worked like crazy to clean that property up. He took out the brambles and the weeds, and he removed the rocks, and he tilled the soil, and he fertilized it, and he planted flowers, and he made an absolutely exquisite garden that he took great pride in. So one day, the young preacher came by for a visit, and as the man proudly showed him around his garden, the preacher said, "You know, you really shouldn't boast, because these are God's creations." And the gardener said, "Well, that may be so, parson, but you should have seen it when God had it to himself." And so here we come up against this interesting situation where we are called to co-create in the rich soil of the earth. That there is a divine element that we can't do without, and yet, and this is kind of scary to me, there is a part that we have that this force that we call God also needs. We are an essential part. So co-creation is about the path of conscious co-creatorship in the rich soil of the earth, and seeing that as the principal engine of evolution. That as we evolve, as we grow in consciousness, we are a key part of bringing expanded consciousness into the earth. And it links our efforts with the field from which all creation arises. And both the things that we want to manifest in our own lives, for our own growth, for our own experience, and those things that we might want to manifest on behalf of the human race are all part of this co-creative work that you and I are involved in every day of our lives. Now, it's easy to feel powerless in this crazy world. I don't know about you, but current events can be very discouraging. And sometimes it feels as if there's little we can do. But the path of co-creatorship suggests that, in fact, there is something we can do. And it's something that we can do every day of our lives. Because the path of co-creatorship is a commitment to take responsibility for bringing consciousness into our thoughts, our intentions, our bodies, into the world and creation itself. Co-creatorship is an opportunity to embrace the unique opportunity of incarnation. And unfortunately, one of the things that can happen when people embrace reincarnation is that they tend to denigrate the incarnation part of it. There is a tendency sometimes to think of this life as something to be gotten over as quickly as possible. I hope I don't have to come back again. I hope this is my last life. We tend to look at this earth and incarnation as a prison sentence rather than as an opportunity to be a co-creator that brings consciousness into the very flesh of our bodies. The Buddhists have the phrase precious human birth to talk about just how rare and valuable it is to have the opportunity to be in incarnation. So at your times when you are most frustrated with the trials and tribulations of being in a state of incarnation, it's a good idea sometimes to step back and remember that your soul did the equivalent of waiting in line for 3 days to get tickets to this event. Even if now that you're here, there are times when you sometimes wonder what in the world you were thinking. Co-creatorship is a commitment to transcend our personal agendas in service to the whole. And I don't mean to say that in a preachy way, that it has to always be about the world as a whole, because generally those things that are best for our own health, happiness, joy, and well-being are going to be the very things that are best for the whole. There was one day recently when I found myself, something had gone nicely and I was singing, and the terrible attack in Israel had just happened. And I had this moment where I thought, how can you be singing when these terrible things have just happened in the world? And then, almost like a soothing balm, the thought settled over me. There is nothing that I can do directly to deal with that situation. But if I send a sense of joy and contentment out into the world in this moment, that may be my best contribution. So when I say transcend our personal agendas in service to the whole, I really don't mean for it to be some highfalutin, preachy idea that every minute of the day is spent slaving away for the whole. It's more that we keep in our mind that what we do always is having an impact on the whole. Now, that is kind of a 3-bullet summary of some principles that I delve into in quite a lot of detail in my book, Beyond Soul Growth, Awakening to the Call of Cosmic Evolution, that does explore this idea, the history of evolutionary thought in the spiritual traditions. It explores the relationship between the way as evolution advances, so too does the presence of consciousness in the earth. It addresses the importance of the physical body and its chakra system as a vehicle for evolution. And it probes questions about where it's all headed, and along the way provides some exercises for practical application. But for our time here, what I really want to focus on is a process that involves co-creating with the infinite field, how we can kind of wrap our minds around some of the attitudes, expectations, and approaches that we can use, and to experiment a little bit with a method for working with that. And the best place I know of to lay that foundation that we need is to look at the very first reading that I could find where Edgar Cayce ever mentioned the concept of co-creation. This was given in 1932, and it was a reading for a 21-year-old who had had prior readings where he had some health concerns. And in this reading, he asked, what change has come into my spiritual life and character? And the response from Edgar Cayce began, this, as we find, is ready for an awakening. And then he said this. Seek then to know self, to know self's relationships to the creative forces that may be manifest in the activities of the mental and spiritual life. Know that the creative energy called God may be as personal as an individual will allow same to be. For the spirit is in the image of the creative forces and seeks manifestation. It may take on that personality that will be allowed by the individual itself. For we are co-laborers, co-creators with that energy we call God, that energy of universal forces. While this may appear to be the whole, if we understand that the Lord thy God is one and all power, all, and I was going along fine, able to read underneath the thumbnails of everybody until I got to this part. All something emanates from that one source. We will get an understanding of ourselves and our abilities. Now, I know that this reading is densely packed, And I don't expect everybody to just absorb it and go on from there. What I have done is extract 3 key points that I think lay the foundation for everything we are doing in this session. So let's look at those one at a time. First of all, right in the middle of this excerpt, spirit is in the image of the creative forces and seeks manifestation. I don't think we can emphasize this too much. The idea that there is something in the creative intention of the divine to seek manifestation, that there was a reason that this something that we call creative force, that we call God, that we call creative energy, the universe, whatever name you're comfortable with, it had an intention behind birthing a physical cosmos that has rocks and trees and plants and everything else that you might, stars and planets, anything else that you might imagine. Or to put it the way C.S. Lewis once quipped, God likes matter, he invented it. So the first thing to hold in mind is that there is a force inherent to the creative nature of this something we call God that seeks to manifest in a 3-dimensional world. And this actually has to do with the great paradox of being and becoming that runs through all the wisdom traditions of the world. The great paradox of being and becoming is about manifestation arising from within the infinite field. Now, let me be the first to say it's very reductionistic to try and portray all that is, let alone the infinite field, in a white square on a slide. But bear with me here. I think you'll see where I'm headed. Everything in the white slide is representative of the unmanifest, formless ground of being. It, in some traditions, is called the emptiness or the void. It is pure being that is unchanging, eternal, resting in great perfection. But it also is so limitless that even trying to describe it violates what it really is. In the Taoist tradition, there's a saying that the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Well, the beingness that can be put on a PowerPoint slide is not the beingness. But if you will just sort of hold it as a symbolic representation, there is arising within this unmanifest, formless ground of being, the realms of manifestation form, and that has traditionally been allied with the concept of becoming. God is pure, unchanging, perfect beingness, and so are we. But God is also manifestation in process, bringing form, bringing something out of nothing. And so are we. And the great paradox of form and formlessness, of being and becoming, is right at the core of the co-creative path, because we recognize that while it is true that there is that within us that never left our oneness with God, never left the great perfection, the part of us that's here in a physical body that has certain traits and characteristics and so on is involved in the world of form. And it is a something that is in the process of becoming, which leads us to the next principle I want to bring out from this dense excerpt that we've started with. The creative energy called God may be as personal as an individual will allow same to be. It may take that form, that personality that will be allowed by the individual. Now, there is so much to this. Sometimes we think that we're headed toward a state of losing ourselves completely in a sea of consciousness where we just dissolve into nothingness. And it is true that some of the Buddhist and most of the Eastern versions of reincarnation do tend to give that impression. But there is another view, an alternative, that suggests that, in fact, the infinite is becoming individualized. The limitless is taking on a form through our embracing it as we live our lives in the earth. Another way I could say that is that we are in the process of helping to create ourselves. There's one fascinating Cayce reading where he says, of course the soul has to go back to God. Where else could it possibly go? But it depends on what we do in the earth, in our incarnations, whether it goes back, and this is a term he uses, empty, as in the beginning, or bearing the name. Now, the name, that's a big topic that we're not going to delve into here, but essentially the name is sort of the shorthand for the identity. And I think it relates to the very closely connected paradox to being and becoming, and that is the idea that our destiny is to know ourselves, to be ourselves, and yet be one with God. That's hard to wrap our minds around, because so often our idea of being ourselves is based on separation. I'm myself when I am other than you. I'm myself when I am in a state of opposition to something else. But the ultimate state of oneness that's described in a lot of the deeper mystical traditions, and it's certainly in the Edgar Cayce view, is that we are moving toward a oneness where at the same time we are a unique development of creative energy, so that in essence, we are in the process of helping to create ourselves into who we will ultimately be. Now let's go to the third point that I wanted to draw from this excerpt, for we are co-laborers, co-creators with the energy we call God. That energy we call universal, I think the word underneath there is forces. So from all of this, we can derive three foundational premises that are going to underlie what we do here. First, there's divine purpose behind the existence of a physical world. That comes from spirit is in the image of creative forces and seeks to manifest. We are tasked with evolving and co-creating ourselves. The energy called God may be as personal as an individual will allow it to be. It may take that personality that will be allowed by the individual itself. And then finally, co-creation involves active participation in the evolution of the world. We are co-laborers, co-creators with that energy we call God, the energy we call universal forces. So, co-creating. What kind of approach can we take if we lay it on top of that foundation? Well, the first deepening of our purpose comes with the realization that what we are doing is simultaneously for our own development and the development of the world. In this particular reading, we're told the experiences that the soul amasses in the earth are toward its own development and toward the development of the creation or the world. I don't know that we often fully grasp just how much of a part we have. As human culture develops, it is, and as it regresses, because of course there are no guarantees that we're on the upward escalator, effort and will and choice is always a part of it. we have a great impact on the way the world is unfolding, as hard as it is sometimes to see that. So let's look at what kinds of assumptions and attitudes we can take when we begin to develop an approach to co-creating with the field of infinite possibilities. It begins with recognizing that we can't not create. Honestly, I wish I could turn it off. I wish I could be only co-creative when I'm in a good mood. I wish I could be only co-creative when I'm feeling good about my life and people and what's going on. But the truth of the matter is, being made in the image and likeness of a creative force, we are inherently, unstoppably, in an ongoing way, creating. So the first question we really have to ask when we embrace a role as a co-creator, when we consciously embark on the path of a co-creator, is, what are we creating by default? Because the truth is, most of the time, our co-creating is not happening when we're in deep meditation, or when we're doing vision boards, or when we're in a wonderful group of like-minded people who pray and meditate and support one another. Those things are all great, don't get me wrong. But for the majority of our time, we are constantly creating with things like how we use our time and our personal priorities. And it can be dumb things like, you go to the bank and there are 5 lines and you jockey to get in the best line. Well, I'm not saying you should never do that. My point is, if you're not in a particular hurry, is that maybe the time to know maybe somebody else needs to be at the head of the line. Maybe you can co-create by recognizing that if somebody else gets ahead, that's your game. We create by default with what we feed our minds and our souls. And I'm not going to even mention social media. We co-create by how we conduct our relationships with one another. We co-create with how we care for our bodies, because again, this is the piece of equipment that we've been issued. And it's pretty important that, I think there's a reason that Edgar Cayce gave 2/3 of his readings about health, because even though he had this profound spiritual philosophy that came through, he always seemed to recognize that a healthy body was a very important part of it. If we want to dig really deeply, we can look at the imprint of consciousness on the very cells of our body to realize it's almost like these, 60 trillion cells we're said to have. We are the consciousness that infiltrates 60 billion little bits of consciousness manifesting in this world. We create by default in the way we care for our environment and the planet as a whole. So something that's a good check if you are on the path of the co-creator is to periodically, maybe at the end of every day, maybe once a week, whatever's comfortable for you, ask, what have I been creating this week? What kinds of attitudes and emotions have I thrown out there? What kinds of thoughts have I built into the collective unconscious, and so on? And then, of course, we're ready to go to the $64,000 question. Is this what I want to create? And if I want to create something else, how do I go about doing that? So we're going to look at how to go about intentionally co-creating what we really want. And of course, the minute we talk about creating what we want, we think about manifestation, think about the power of end state imagery. Certainly, it is a mainstay of of hypnotherapy, that whatever you can get the mind to accept as true, especially at the subconscious level, everything will begin to form itself around that. If you are able to get a good, clear image of you living your ideal life, you will begin to shape your choices, behaviors, and so on to manifest that. If you have images of yourself, if you want to be a healthy person, you create images of your body fit and healthy and lithe and muscular. And as you hold that as if it's true now, you begin to make the choices in nutrition and exercise and energy and whatever else may be a part of it to bring that about. So we know that end state imagery can be very, very powerful. We see it even in things like faith healing. Hold that image of the body healed, of everything working the way it's supposed to. And certainly in so-called faith healing, if the desired outcome does not occur, very often there's the subtle or not so subtle accusation that, well, the imagery wasn't strong enough. The belief wasn't powerful enough. There weren't enough affirmations stuck on the mirror. And we can very easily see that end state imagery is very powerful, and it can be very, very helpful. And we can understand why we find it as a key part of any of the approaches to manifestation that we might find out there in the world. But there is a problem with this. There's a problem with end state imagery in that, yes, it can be very powerful. This is the stuff that testimonials are made of. We read about them in the books we pick up to inspire ourselves. But as powerful and helpful as end state imagery can be, that ability to just feel it, live it, be it as if it is already an accomplished fact and it's yours, as powerful as that can be, and anybody who has a shelf full of self-help books and videos and whatnot can attest to this, it is just as often a total flop. Why is this? What is it that goes wrong when the most powerful imagery and the most compelling vision boards and the most beautifully crafted affirmations have not brought about the thing that we want to create? Well, there are several things that can undermine the success of end state imagery. We may have things going on an unconscious level that block or subvert what we think we're creating. You know, we have the image of ourselves looking very svelte on a Caribbean beach, but deep down inside, what we are really holding is the image of how much we love to sit on the couch and eat Doritos. And that can work as a not so subtle subversion of what we want. We can have that clear end state imagery about getting that wonderful job where we're going to make a difference in the world, and the conscious mind is clear as a bell on that outcome. But at the unconscious level, we may be remembering the time in third grade when some authority figure said, if you don't do it my way, you're never going to succeed. And so the end state imagery comes to naught. Another thing that can happen as a problem with end state imagery is that magical thinking tries to defy the laws of nature. Now, I'm not saying that there are not some highly advanced beings who can manifest a gold egg out of nothing, or who can levitate. These stories have been in the mystical literature down through the ages, and I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. But I will say that for most of us, and I certainly put myself in this category, I still have to slog through the physical world to make things happen. if I have a powerful end state imagery about something I want to create, it isn't going to magically show up. I cannot imagine envelopes in my mailbox that have big checks in them if I have done absolutely nothing to earn money. And yet, sometimes the idea that magically these things will work can lead to lots of disappointment. One of the things I've noticed over the years is that a lot of the people who make a lot of money on promoting these things have made their money promoting these things, which is an interesting phenomenon. They are creating hope and expectation, which sells things, which creates their success. And yet it doesn't always turn out that way for the ordinary person who's buying the books, buying the courses, doing the best they can to work with using end state imagery to create. Now, this is a biggie. One of the other problems with end state imagery is that we assume that good outcomes involve getting what we want. And I don't think there's a one of us who can't look back over our life and be very grateful that we didn't get certain things that we had wanted at a time in our lives. Things that maybe we were bitterly disappointed not to get at the time we wanted them, but nonetheless, we are able to see now that that was not at all in line with what we wanted. So the more we have fixed expectations about what a good outcome is, the more we may be getting into the territory of be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And also the more we may be moving into the territory where tunnel vision can blind us to alternative manifestations. Most of the time, we think too small. One of my favorite things to include in hypnotic suggestion is the line that says, things may seem to be one way, but turn out to be even better. And so even though we have, most of us, been taught to make something achievable, you have to have a SMART goal, it has to be specific, it has to be, oh, I'm having a brain freeze about the M. It has to be as if now, it has to be timed, it has to have, oh, it has to be measurable, that's the M. Those are very fixed expectations. And yet, the truth is that if we do that, we may get what we are setting, but what might we have missed out on that would have come if we weren't quite so fixed on our tunnel vision view of what we wanted? So the task before us is to recognize and use the power of end state imagery, because certainly it is very powerful. And I don't want anyone to go away thinking I've said end state imagery is bad, because it is a very, very potent thing to step into another state of experience and claim it as if it is now. We want to be able to have the power of end state imagery while avoiding the limitations of having fixed expectations. And so, some thoughts about how we can kind of keep the baby when we throw out the bathwater. First thing, I'm going to call this whole approach stepping forward in the energy of expectancy. And I'm making a somewhat arbitrary distinction between expectation and expectancy. For the purposes of what we're doing here, expectation is a very fixed thing. It's this is it, this is specific, it's measurable, it's what I'm going for. Where expectancy is a little more open-ended. Expectancy is a little bit more co-creative, as we're going to be seeing. the first thing to keep in mind is that this mysterious stuff that we create with is the energy that's in a constant state of flux. It's very malleable and it's responsive to changing conditions. And not a one of us is co-creating in a vacuum. The things that we set in motion with our creative intentions may be pretty good for the conditions that were happening at the time. But as conditions shift and change and other people make their free will choices and other people are involved in their energy of creation, it can make a big difference. So we need to kind of think about the energy that we're working with as a very fluid, malleable thing that needs to be free enough to respond to changing situations and circumstances. Closely related, and I really love this one because when it was first suggested to me, it hit me with great force. A human being is a process of events in consciousness and ever changing. I'm about to run out of power. Oh, thank goodness. I got plugged in time. Talk about energy. I got all set up. I got my light. I got my screen. I got everything set up. And the one thing I forgot to do was plug in my laptop. Okay. I'm going to let my heart stop beating quite so fast. A human being is a process of events in consciousness. You know, we tend to think of ourselves as a fixed something. We tend to think of ourselves as solid. And yet we know even on the cellular level, the cells you're sitting in right now that make up your body are different cells than your body was made up of. You know, the old thing was that it took about 7 years for all the cells to exchange. And there have been modifications of that over the years, but essentially the cells are constantly changing, and yet you're still you. We'll go down to the subatomic level, where everything that is making up the cells of your body is a process that is subject to thoughts, feelings, intentions. We are a fluid process rather than being a fixed something. The next thing to keep in mind is that fixed expectations create most of our turmoil and misery. We know this. There are so many things out there that beautifully remind us that the idea that wanting what we want and having fixed expectations that get disappointed is where we end up finding all of our unhappiness. And when you think about it, it makes sense that if we are living in a world when everything is fluid and changing, it is not at all stabilizing to try to be fixed. Think of the ocean. If you are standing in the ocean and there are great waves and you're trying to keep your, let's say your chest up in the water, and you're trying to keep your feet planted flat on the sand, you're going to have a heck of a time staying stable when those waves come washing in. Where if you're on a surfboard and you can ride the waves, you're relatively stable. So there is a meta stability in letting go of our fixed expectations so that we can move with the fluidity of the world around us. The next principle, and this is a pretty important one that is very well known in spiritual circles today, but it has direct implication for our co-creative path. The energy that we are is always now. There is only one place where we are creating anything, and it's always now. Our nervous system responds to what is happening now. We can have a thought about the past or an expectation of the future, But the physiological response to that is happening now. The energy that we live with is something that cannot exist anywhere but right now. So when you think about it, if we try to co-create in a way where we set something in stone for 6 months from now, well, that's kind of looking for some problems. Conditions could change. The energy that we have in the now, when we set that for 6 months from now, may not be the same in that fluid process of consciousness that we really are. And so as we move forward in the energy of expectancy, what we're looking for is in open-ended energy of intention, we create in the now with the field of infinite possibilities. And that is a process that we're going to be working with over the next couple of minutes. So if you will, just get comfortable. And what I would like you to do is not be concerned with trying to remember all of these steps, because I'm going to put up a slide afterward that encapsulates the steps we went through. So please don't be busy making notes about any of this or trying to remember them as we go through it. Instead, I would like you to get comfortable and ready to just relax. Take a deep breath and close your eyes. Nice deep breath. Because this session is about stepping forward in the energy of expectancy rather than getting caught on fixed expectations. And our starting point will be your intention, because intentions are a powerful, powerful co-creator with the fluid energy that is our co-creative partner. When you think of being in a state of expectancy for co-creative possibilities, what is it that you really want to create? Consider for a moment that you are one who co-creates with the same creative forces that brought something out of nothing at the dawn of time. That you are a co-creative partner with the forces that are evolving toward higher and higher expression of consciousness in this world of form. The forces that are evolving and holding the planets in motion. That force is ready to work in you and through you to bring forth things that may be a meaningful part of your intention, things that you really want to create. And it could be things like love or healing or abundance or growth or balance or peace in your life. What is your deepest intention for the coming year, for example, or even the next month? Or another way to get at your intention would be to ask, if you were fully awake to a field of limitless possibility, what direction would you take? What theme would emerge from among the many possibilities that attract you? What draws you onward? And consider as you get in touch with your intention, what would your personal experience be focused on manifesting? What is your deepest heart's desire for manifestation in the wider world? What would you like to create, co-create? Now, holding your intention in mind of that deepest intention for what you would want to manifest in your life and in the world, you can probably imagine a variety of ways that intention might manifest in your life. You probably already have some images of what it would be like. Ways you could find yourself reacting and responding in certain situations, or maybe things you'd be doing as a life work or as an involvement in community and family. Maybe there are things you would no longer be doing, things that you've wanted to stop doing for a while because they're not the things you want to create. You know, we all tend to carry an idealized image of how we would be, what life would be like if our highest intentions were being fully manifested in some consistent way. It might be some professional attainment. Now, these might seem like the kind of fixed expectations that we're trying to go beyond. But for now, it's okay, because remember, we're using the power of those visualizations. And then we're going to release them, using them as a springboard to the energy of expectancy. So allow yourself to enjoy just feeling how nice it would be to manifest some of these things. And as you pay attention to those images you hold about you and about the manifestation of your highest intentions, it may be that one or two kind of stand out as representative of the whole, or more compelling than the others. Go ahead and select one or two of the images that for you were the most evocative of you actually manifesting one of your high intentions. And now imagine just stepping into the state of already being there. Put aside any concern about time lapse or how to get from here to there. Just put all that aside. And for a moment, really embody the fulfillment, the expression, the manifestation of that intention. Get right into your body. Feel it. See what you see. Think what you think. Do what you do. Breathe it in. Feel it. And at this step, it's fine to let the image be quite specific. It's okay to let the specificity of it really crank up the juice. We're using it as a springboard. Continue putting energy into this imagining of it's already there. Feel the way you hold your body when you're in this state of already being there. There might be a shift in your posture. There might be a difference in how you move. There may be things about your facial expression as you mentally, imaginatively live it. There may be things that someone would see if they were watching you. They would just know that you're someone living their highest purpose. You're there. It's obvious. You exude it. You own it. And if you had more than one compelling image, go ahead and step into that one too. Feel it. And if you only had one, just stay with the one you started. Feel the way you hold your body, the way your facial expression forms, what you do, what you say. The more you can really get into that state, the more powerful the state of expectancy is going to be. Let yourself live it fully in your imagination. Take a deep breath. It's always good to breathe life into these images that you're living in your imagination. Feel the energy. Now, the energy and the feeling state that these images and these imaginings evoke within you may be beyond any language you could use to describe it. But it's possible there is a word or a short phrase that you can use as a reminder, as an awakening. And if one pops to mind, something that just kind of sums up the feeling and the energy state of living your intention, just notice what it is. And if one doesn't come, that's okay too, because I want you to just really stay with the energy. Staying with the feeling state and the energy. Let all the imagery just sort of slip away. Let it go. Imagine that you're floating in a sea of the feeling, the energy. It surrounds you. It washes through you. Just pay attention to the feeling state and the energy, letting the images just float away. Like you're shifting the spotlight away from the imagery that created the energy and putting the spotlight instead on the feeling state that arose from the imagery. Float in a sea of that feeling, that energy. And now, just ask yourself, what could I do next to bring my intention to manifestation. Later on today or tomorrow at the very latest. What does that energy suggest to you as a step that moves you toward the state of already being there? One small thing. Doesn't have to be big. And whatever it is, it's important that you follow through, that you take that very specific in the now direction. And then later on, when you're ready to take the next step beyond that, check back in with the energy, the feeling state, before asking your higher self, before asking creative forces, God, the universe, what is my next step now? But only do that after you've implemented the first step you were given. Now, once again, let yourself return to the imagery. One more time, bring the imagery in. Step right back into that state of having already attained. Get that ramped up feeling state. Feel it. And then once again, let the imagery fall away. But hold the energy. This is your state of expectancy. Notice how spacious it is when you let the specific images fall away. It can be a state of, I don't know what it is, but something is coming. Or I don't know what form it will take, but something good is on the way. Or I don't know what the answer is, but my question propels me forward. It can take forms like that. Just notice your state of expectancy. And you can cultivate this state of expectancy anytime by using your end state imagery to ramp up the feeling until you're ready to let the images fall away. You'll get better and better at just tapping into the state. And from that state is where you'll always ask, what do I do now? Right now, in the next moments, the next step. And it becomes a marvelous, constantly evolving, shifting, perfect unfoldment of you in a co-creative partnership in a world of infinite possibilities. And now, as you feel ready to do so, just open your eyes and come back outside. Now, I told you that when we completed the process, I would show you a recap slide that went over the steps. So let's take a quick look at that now. Here's how the practice goes. First, you let your intention set a general direction. And then you do use that sense of already being what your intention moves you toward. That's where you use vivid imagery. You use the imagery to create an energy state, a feeling state, a consciousness. But, and this is key, because if you stay there, you're still in fixed expectations. You let the imagery fall away. And while you're in that state of expectancy, it's a field of pure possibility. You ask, what do I do now? You're not looking for the complete plan. You're not looking for what do I do next month, next year. It's what is the very next step for me to take? And you take that step. And in this way, you stay in that flow. I once, in the process of doing a kind of a inspirational writing dialogue, got the information that if I place my awareness on the Christ consciousness and ask, what should I do now? I could always rely on the answer. Not what should I do 3 hours from now or next week, but what is the very next thing for me to do? And that if that intention was placed on the highest within me, I could rely on the information about what to do now. Because in that moment, you are being that self who exists only in the now, and you are co-creating with the field. So I urge you to take a process like this into your life. Try it. We like to kind of get the whole plan laid out. We like to have that control. But again, that need to stay in control is one of the most destabilizing things we can do. Instead, we serve the energy of the infinite field. Now, I know that we are pretty close to what was to be our concluding time. We did get started a little bit late, so I don't know whether we have the latitude to take a few minutes for any questions and discussion. But I'm here and would love to entertain that if anybody would like to raise anything as a question or a point for discussion.
Or is it an implied in the initial? Yeah, okay. Are you engaging the higher self while co-creating in the field, or is it implied in the initial intention?
I think it's implied in the initial intention when you consult what is the highest, your highest intention. And again, that doesn't mean, sometimes we can fool ourselves. What we think is our highest intention, it has other things going on. But the only way we learn is through trial and error. So as we ideally, if we have a sense of a higher self, if we have a sense of a relationship with God or creative forces or Christ consciousness, it's always good to kind of put your attention there as we set an intention.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next question, Lynn, is how can we utilize the idea of co-creation to create health in our physical bodies?
Oh, that's a biggie. That is really a biggie. Okay. First of all, I think that it becomes really important to remember that what are we creating by default thing. I'm as guilty as the next one of not always creating the best by default. But the first thing we have to look at is, what are our habits? What are we doing that is aligned with our best understanding of the highest health? And so we always work on the level of what do we already know to do. And what I have found most of the time when it comes to matters of health is that most of us know to do things that we are not doing. So this kind of exercise can be used there by, again, end state imagery of highest health, feeling vibrant, feeling strong, feeling healthy, all of those things, and then asking, what is the next step? And it may not be some massive program of self-healing. It may be one little change that needs to be made. The other thing I would say is to remember that sometimes the things that are working come from a long time ago and very deep. I talked about stuff that's going on at the unconscious level that can get in the way. Well, if you throw in not only the experiences of this lifetime, but how many other lives over the course of time, there may be certain patterns that we have to deal with that are not solvable. And I don't like that. I wish I could change that. But I think it's part of what's built in. So some of it comes from deciding how we are going to engage with our physical challenges. And certainly for all of us, and I'm in the demographic where it becomes increasingly apparent, as you get older, you're going to decline in health. I mean, you reach a point where you recognize that you're not going to stay perfectly healthy forever. So part of it, I think, too, is coming to peace with the gradual decline of the physical body. Not that, I mean, I don't want to, I'm going to go fighting the whole way, but to also gracefully surrender to those things you can't change. And that may not be the most satisfying answer in the world, but I think you have touched on one of the very, very serious questions that we all deal with. Remember too, and this I think I do want to make sure I include in this answer, the consciousness we hold is the patterning that affects the consciousness of our cells. There's a fascinating concept in the Edgar Cayce material that says that we are cells in the body of God. Think about that. And that the cells in our body are universes in the process of becoming. Now, that opens a can of worms that obviously we don't have time to explore in any depth. But the point is that we are to the cells of our body as God is to us. Mm-hmm. And we have the capacity to shed love, forgiveness, light, healing on the cells of our body the same way we would hope that that was shed on us from our creative source.
Oh, beautiful. Well said. Thank you. Do we have any questions here? Person questions? Online questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Lynn. That was really great. We're going to do a raffle for your book.
Oh, how exciting.
Awakening to the Call of Cosmic Evolution, Beyond Soul Growth. All right, and our winner is Tony Riley. She's not here, is she? Yeah. She'll be another. Amari Thomas. Wonderful. Come be in since you have your. Oh, thank you. Photo. Oh, come. Show Lynn.
Oh, let me come back. I was busy putting up my contact slide, but let me come back for a minute here.
We're coming back to say hello, Maury.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi, thank you.
Where's she?
I hope you enjoy it.
Right
Oh.
there.
I can't, I'll face this way. Oh, you're right there. Hi. That was so powerful. Thank you so much. And I'm sitting back there just holding my hands in prayer saying, please, 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 I want that book. And I got it. And so the power of intention, right? Lynn, thank you so much for being in this world.
Well, thank you. That was a lovely, lovely thing that you just said. And if I could say, if anybody wants to follow up with a question, contact me, whatever. Let me one more time just do a quick screen share.
Accessyourpotential.net.
Right, accessyourpotential.net. You can go to my website. You can go to my website and get a lot of information. There is an email contact for me on the website, and I work with hypnosis, life coaching, spiritual mentoring, neurolinguistics, and all that kind of stuff. And I do services via Zoom as well as at my office. So feel free to contact me. If you just have a question about something that didn't get covered or that wasn't clear, be happy to correspond with you. Just let me know.
Thank you, Lynn Sparrow Christy. Everybody give her a big hand of applause. Thank you so much. I think we're going to take a quick break until 4 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.